Hey everybody, it's Sam Dunn. I'm back in the banger hangar at BangerTV for Overkill reviews, and I'm excited. Why? Well, I get to talk about one of my all-time favorite metal bands. That's right, the legends from Brazil are back. Let's talk Sepultura. I'm here to talk about Quadra, released today on Nuclear Blast Records worldwide. Well, what to say about Sepultura? Well, first of all, this is their 15th studio release. Can you believe it? Formed in 1984 in Brazil, had an absolutely legendary tear right through the 80s into the mid-90s, of course, with Max Cavalera at the mic with brother Igor and then Paulo and Andreas. And we all know the story. In the late 90s, Max split from the band. Derek Green from Cleveland, I believe, joined the band. The band shifted their sound somewhat, moving more towards a kind of more hardcore approach, which spoke really to Derek's sensibilities. And then, with the addition of Eloy Casagrande, an absolute menace on the kit in the 2010s, the band shifted their sound, bit more ambitious, bit more risky, bit more experimental, bit more prog. Can you believe it? If I thought I'd be saying that when I was listening to Morbid Visions when I was a fucking teenager, I wouldn't have believed my words, but here we are. Let's get into Quadra. Okay, a bit of context for this. I think a lot of people have looked at the history of Sepultura in two phases. Basically, there's the Max phase up until the mid to late 90s, and then there's the Derek phase. But I think what is clear with Quadra is really Sepultura is a band with three phases. We've got the Max era, the early Derek era in the 2000s, and now this much more ambitious period. Speaking of ambition, Quadra, a bit of a concept album. Now, the word quadra is Portuguese for sport court. That's the literal translation, but more colloquially, it references territories or spaces in which we live and dwell. And I think Andreas and the guys were thinking along the lines of religion, nation, state, all these things that keep us divided or maybe connect us. So there's kind of a lofty concept behind this record, and it's a record of fours, which is really interesting. So maybe there's a bit of numerology here in the background. And reading about this record, Andreas conceived of it as basically 4 sides. So it's like an old double record approach. And what I find really interesting is that each side has its own character. Pretty cool approach. Let's hear what it sounds like. All right, so it's 12 songs. So 3 songs per side, I guess. Side 1 of album 1 is unquestionably the thrash side. And the opening track, Isolation, fucking rules. Already what's clear with the previous record that I reviewed 3 years ago, Machine Messiah, the band made a very different statement coming out of the gate. It was a very slow, plodding approach to that opening song, which kind of signaled, listen, we're not going to just sort of kick in with the typical thrasher. Well, surprise, surprise, they flipped that right on its head with Quadra, and Isolation has probably got 2 of the best fast Sepultura riffs I've heard out of this band in a long time, especially at minute 30. For all the fans of Beneath the Remains and didn't realize that, like, before The Haunted and the entire Swedish melodic death metal scene, there was a band called Sepultura from Brazil that were coming up with all those riffs long before those bands. And for an old Beneath the Remains fan, it's right in the heart for me. Love the start to this record. Side 2, if you will, of Quadra moves in a slightly more roots-ish, percussion-focused direction, kind of slows the pace down a bit, and for all the fans of the Chaos AD Roots era of Sepultura, this might be your favorite side on the double album. For me, where the album really hits its stride is right in the middle, somewhere around side 3. You get songs like Raging Void, Guardians of Earth, and the instrumental Pentagram. This is really fabulous work, primarily from Andreas, and I feel that as time has passed and as we've entered the 4th fucking decade of Sepultura, I find what the band is doing is they're actually going back to a lot of that more melodic, spacious, classically inspired stuff that we heard on Beneath the Remains and Schizophrenia. But on Quadra, of course, it's coming at you with the full-on 2020 Jens Bogren production. So they're really standing their ground and holding up with bands that are, 20, 30 years younger than them. But I really love this area of the record because I feel it's that right combination of the brutality and the speed and the extremity that we've always loved from Sepultura. But Andreas is really able to expand out, explore different ideas on the guitar. Pentagram, for Voivod fans, I think there might be some quotes in there if you can find them. Just great work from Andreas and the guys in the middle of the record. Getting to the tail end of the record, the last few songs sort of take what was established in the middle of the record and, well, take it a few steps further. Some very melodic, more contemplative, slower pieces at the end of the record. Derek exploring more and more clean vocals on this album than the previous two. I think this is showing signs of Derek's maturity as a vocalist. He's gaining more and more confidence, exploring different ranges. I like Agony of Defeat. To me, there's a bit of a Faith No More vibe in there with all of the strings and the cleaner vocals. For me, it takes what was great about the middle of the record and, I don't know, just dilutes it just a little too much for me. And maybe at the end of the day, Quadra is great because of this 4-part concept, but there's nothing really tying it together. I would have loved, actually, if they had come back to the way they started the album at the end and just sort of hammered us with some great classic thrash at the end. So in the end, I think Quadra is a great record from Sepultura. I do think it's better than Machine Messiah and the previous one. I think the band is dipping its toes further and further and further into this experimental world. And while maybe there's moments when I miss the speed and the intensity and the thrash element, I think in the big picture, this is a good direction for the band to go. I was not a huge fan of the Sepultura catalog from 98's Against through to the end of the 2000s. It was just a bit too straightforward, a bit too hardcore, and not enough of that classical, slightly more European influenced sound. And I think this is really Andreas firmly establishing himself as one of the great metal songwriters on the guitar, and he's finding a place in Sepultura to explore a lot of different ideas, and I think that's a better direction than staying purely in that thrashy, hardcore zone. I don't know, at the end of the day, maybe not as many favorite tracks on this album. I really liked Sworn Oath off Machine Messiah, but hey, Isolation, Pentagram, Raging Void, Guardians of Earth, these are big, epic tracks. So, you know what? I gave the last one 3.5 because I want the band to keep going where they're going. Just put a little more thrash in at the end, boys. Bring us back. More Beneath the Remains. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 skulls on Overkill Reviews. Replicated over time, but I want to never lie, never shout, so we say.